Let's switch gears here to the Reds. We are currently at the All-Star break. The Reds get back to action on Friday night in the nation's capital against the Nationals. They sit at 47-50 overall, fourth in the NL Central, 8 games back of the first place Brewers, and they are currently 3 games out of the final NL wildcard spot. Let's talk about the All-Star game real quick. There's not a lot to speak of, but Hunter Green didn't pitch real well. He came in for the 5th inning, gave up the 2-run shot that broke a 3-3 tie and ended up costing the National League the game. He also had given up another hard hit ball that would have been out in most parks. It was like 400 and something feet to dead center field, and a hard hit single before the home run that ended up winning the game for the American League. I mean, to me, that's always just a big who cares? Like,
correct.
It's an all-star game. Who cares?
Correct. The only thing I would say is I did want to see Ellie run. Didn't you want to see him run?
Well, yeah, I was going to get, so he came into the game in the 6th inning as a defensive sub. He went 1 for 2 at the plate, had a single, and I thought it set up perfect. Skinny, you're seeing on there on first base. He had several pitches while he was sitting there on first. I thought for sure we were going to see him at least take second. Do you think that David Bell being on the bench told him no? Like, don't take any chances or what?
So a friend of mine, we were having a beer yesterday, and the All-Star game replay was on in the bar we were in, and he said, and actually, we were there at the time of re-seeing Ellie's single. And I said, I'm surprised he didn't run. He goes, maybe he was told before he left, whatever you do in this All-Star game, don't get hurt. And maybe that was the case.
It almost had to be when you look, because he wasn't even thinking about it.
No,
he was taking a step or two off, kind of laughing as he's going back.
And I realized at the time he was technically, the tying run was at the plate because of his single, and they were down 2 runs. Maybe that played into it. But there's a part of me that just says that they told him, listen, dude, you can take an extra base if you want. You can run the bases however you'd like, but you're not stealing a base. We're not going to do that.
I tend to think that's what happened too, because it just looked like he had no intention of looking to run there. And look, I guess with the way that he slides over top of the base and the force that he goes into all the time, maybe you're worried about his ankle getting hung up, or he often goes head first, maybe his wrist or something like that. So I guess I kind of get it, but I'm with you. I was hoping we would get to see Ellie do what he does once he got on base. Skinny, the Reds are just one of 5 teams, the others being the Braves, Mets, Diamondbacks, and Padres, in contention for the 3 NL wild card spots with a positive run differential currently. How much stock do you put into that? Do you think that bodes well for the second half of the season?
I do, to some degree, because it seems like that eventually evens itself out. It really and truly does. That their Pythagorean record is not what it should be, and some of that's luck, some of that's 1-run games that you've lost, unfortunately, and that tends to even itself out eventually. Maybe this is the evening out process from last year of remember the Raleigh Reds, how many times they came back to win games, and maybe this is the statistical evening out of that. But those things do tend to even out a little bit, and it would suggest that this is an above 500 team that played, unfortunately, at a below 500 level. The problem, Rick, and I did this the other day, I just put doing math in my head. If you think, and I'm just going to throw out the arbitrary number of 84 wins, gets the 3rd wild card, this team's still got to go 37-28 over the last 65. Is it good enough to do that?
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either.
Here's the biggest reason I say that, because I feel like the pitching staff has pitched above its level in the first half of the year.
I don't, to be honest with you. I think they've pitched the level I was. To your point, I'm not saying you're wrong.
I get. Let me rephrase a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know that what they've done to this point is sustainable. I mean, they've been rotating guys in and out. They've had the days where it's been like a bullpen day. They've had Nick Lodolo coming in and out, back and forth. How much are you going to be able to count on all these guys to put together the same type of half a season they did in the first half of the season? I just don't know that I trust all these guys right now with the different injury things that are going on, the history of a guy like Lodolo. Hunter Green is looking really good, but there's still a chance that he has a regression in the second half of the year a little bit.
See, but to me, Hunter Green's now pitching to the level I expected him to eventually get to. Nick Lodolo, I've never had anything but high expectations for him other than the injury issue. And Andrew Abbott, honestly, I think last year, if you just cut off his season where he probably hit the wall and they were forced to pitch him because they were in a playoff race, Andrew Abbott's not got a pretty nice sample size of being a damn good starting pitcher in this league.
But again, last year he hit the wall in the second half. Lodolo can't stay healthy. Again, if these guys are just pitching normally and they've never had any issues, great. I feel much better about it. But these guys have question marks going in the second half of the year. And the first half was pretty darn good for a team that I wasn't sure about the pitching staff coming in, quite honestly. So that's why I would say I don't think they can play 9 to 10 games over 500 baseball in the second half of the year. I
think it's a big ask. And again, that's just getting to 84 wins. Maybe the number's 86. I think 84. It could be 83 for all I know. But anyway, I'm using 84 as an arbitrary number. It's still, they have to play a fairly high percentage of winning baseball to get to that record.
I have some predictions here I'm going to ask you to make in a second, and that'll be kind of one of them. But before we get there, Rhys Hines was obviously the big storyline coming into the All-Star break. How much do you trust him as an offensive addition this team needed in the outfield versus how much do you think they still need to make a big move?
I still think they need to make a move. It's been fun. I'll be honest with you, I did a bunch of yard work Sunday, but we got done in time for me to watch a chunk of the game, and I had it on the radio for a chunk. The couple of at-bats I saw from Rhys Hines on Sunday, I swear every time he hits the ball now, I think it's going out of the ballpark. And maybe it was the crowd reaction because he hit a couple of fly balls that were hit okay, like, well short of the warning track, but hit deep enough outfield. But it feels like, the ball's been jumping off his bat so much that anytime you see him hit one up in the air, you feel like it's gone. And I kind of felt that way. Like, oh, man, that's out. And no, it's not. Give me a week to 2 weeks. It's hard to answer that question because we've seen this story before across baseball. Guy comes up, guy gets hot. Again, the big difference for this is he was a second-round pick. He was highly thought of. Struggled hitting in AAA. We know that. Had a pretty good year the year before in AA. It's a big jump to say, well, what you did in AAA, and you're going to be 120 points better in your batting average and 300 better in your OPS in the big leagues in your first time around. That's a big ask. And so was this just the typical flash in the pan that we see a lot of times? Or is he at least a legit enough power hitter to be in the mix? To put your point, though, I mean, I think for them, I think A, record-wise, and B, Rhys Hines-wise, because if Rhys Hines goes into a 2-week tailspin here before the trade deadline, we talked about this before, they still need a long-term right-handed bat solution in the outfield. No matter just for this season or not, they need that long-term. And so if Rhys Hines tanks in the next couple of weeks, then all he is not another bit partner you can occasionally tap into and hope. If he stays hot, then maybe they feel he is that long-term solution.
It would be silly. No one knows the answer to this question. It would be silly to have like a big hot take one way or the other of like Rhys Hines is definitely the answer. Sure. Rhys Hines is going to suck. He's got no chance. Anything like that. Which way do you find yourself leaning more, though? Do you think he's going to be the real deal, or do you lean more towards like, no, this is probably not real?
This is probably not real. Yeah. I will say the ball jumps off his bat, though. The key has been, and it was an issue in AAA, it's been a little bit of an issue here, too, is will he make enough contact to make it matter?
Yeah. All right, let's do some Reds predictions real quick, Skinny. I just have a handful of them here. They're arbitrary. There's no real rhyme or reason to any of them. Will the Reds play over or under 500 baseball the rest of the way?
I think they'll play over. I just don't think it'll be enough to get to the win total you need.
Will Elly De La Cruz become the second player ever to record a season with 30 homers and 70 stolen bases? He currently has 17 homers and 46 stolen bases.
I think he will. I honestly think he will. He goes in some home run, some splurges. He was in a splurge kind of at the moment. I think that's going to be just enough for him to get to that 30 number. And I think the 70 stolen bases will come easy.
I think that's automatic. I mean, he's almost to 50 already. It's almost impossible to think he doesn't steal 20 more bases here in the second half of the season. And the home run thing, I actually feel pretty good about that too. I mean, as good as he was for stretches during the first half, I didn't feel like he ever had a crazy power surge where he went on like a long run of hitting a bunch of homers in a row. I still think there's the potential for that. And like, he may slump, but it's going to be more of a slump with his average, not with him not hitting the ball out of the park at all, because he just got too much power there. I think he gets to 30 homers. I do.
I do. And probably there's one inside the park homer in there in him at some point too.
There you go. That's a good way to get to 13 more if you need it. Will Matt McLain play over under 20 games for McLain?
I'm going to go under. I mean, the right now, the target date for the rehab assignment is August the 12th to start it. That's a big ask to just stay down for a couple of weeks and come back up and start hitting. And I think the kid glove him as well. I mean, unless he comes up and he just starts raking right away and they're in a playoff push and they need him in the lineup. If not, I just don't think they're going to push it with him either.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What if he comes up, we get into the month of September, we're in the first week of September, and they're like, oh, he's about ready to come back finally. At that point, do you even bring him back?
Oh, I think so. Because I think there'll still be just because of the wild card situation, that they'll be at least in it enough to have some early games of the month matter. And I think maybe for everybody's sake, including his, you'd like to see him at least face some major league pitching this year to say, okay, the injury's behind him. This is the Matt McClain we all know, and he's ready to hit the ground running next year.
Who will be the second half MVP for the Reds?
I'm going Spencer Steer. I mean, he hasn't hit a power surge yet either. He's driven in runs. Something tells me he gets hot at some point.
I like that pick. And then finally, do you think the Reds will make a move to improve? Do you think they'll become sellers? Or do you think they'll let the trade deadline come and go without much action like last year?
I'll go with the latter, because I think they're going to be in that such gray area of not knowing, well, we're only 3 out. I do think you'll see them maybe deal one of their relievers. There's a lot of teams sniffing around for bullpen help, and that's where you can usually get some prospects back, and honestly get probably more value in return. I just don't know if there's enough, and that's what sucks, if there's going to be enough right-handed power hitting outfielders on the market for you to give up something of quality in the organization.
I tend to lean there too. It feels like it's going to be a lot like last year at the deadline. You're too close to become a seller. I mean, with the third wild card spot, everyone's in contention still. You're only 3 games out. You've got a young, fun team. You're going to keep battling for it, but I just don't think I don't think they're going to make a big move, but I definitely don't think they're going to sell either.
Yeah.
All right, we'll move on to a question we had that was for Ask Skinny Anything, but it's kind of related to all this, so we'll just go with it now. If the Reds finish 10 or more games under 500 and Bell isn't fired, what does it say about the franchise? I'll go ahead and head this off at the pass. All teams deal with injuries.
They do. This has been a catastrophic amount to some degree, but to that point, I mean, at what point is enough, right? I mean, if that's the case, even if it's change for change's sake, I think you have to make it. I think the problem is the extension he signed. I just don't see the Castellini family and the ownership group paying this guy to do nothing. I just don't.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah. And I don't know if there's enough groundswell in the fan base. Honestly, the old, I'm never going to another Reds game until they fight. I don't see that. I just don't see that groundswell in the fan base, right? I just don't.
Yeah, I don't think that this team is going to completely crash and burn and be 10 games under 500 either. But is there a point where no matter what, it's just unacceptable?
I mean, that's a pretty good number for it to be unacceptable, to be honest with you, especially when you don't have a whole lot of cachet built up to begin with, right? You have one playoff appearance in the goofy COVID year, and your team flamed out very quickly. What else really have you done?
Well, then you're saying there's no win-loss record that could get him fired?
No, I don't think there is. I really don't. But I do think that honestly, if it's 10 games, to me, enough is enough. At some point, it's change for change's sake. I just don't see. There's two things in play here: what I think and what the Reds will do, and I just don't think they'll move on. I just don't, because again, I don't think there's enough groundswell from the fan base that demands that change enough for the Castellinis to be bothered by it. Where else you gonna go?
I agree with that in reality, or I should say, in a realistic scenario. Because I don't think the Reds are going to be 10 or more games under 500.
Right.
But if you get 10 or more games under 500 this year, then I think that groundswell is going to be pretty swollen.
And that may be the case.
Yeah. All right. The Reds also had their draft. They took Wake Forest pitcher Chase Burns with the 2nd overall pick. They then went with Tyson Lewis, a high school shortstop, followed by LSU relief pitcher Luke Holman, and so on and so forth for another 100 picks or so. Skinny, is there anything more pointless than talking about the MLB draft?
Probably not, but I will say this. I do like their recent trend of college pitchers in the draft. I know Hunter Green's not part of that, but Hunter Green was such an electric player, an electric arm, that it was hard to avoid taking him when they took him. But look at the members of this staff right now. Look, Nick Lodolo, college pitcher. Andrew Abbott, college pitcher. Rhett Lauder, who's struggling a bit in the minors at the moment, last year's first-round pick, obviously college pitcher. Chase Burns, college pitcher. You mentioned the LSU reliever in the third, college pitcher. I like that trend. I really do.
Shout out to Ryan Wagner. That's all. I don't know why, but whenever they take a college pitcher, I immediately think of Ryan Wagner. Because do you remember when they drafted him and then brought him up immediately and put him in the bullpen a day later?
Rushed him. They rushed him, for goodness sakes.
Which, by the way, we probably won't see Chase Burns throw in the minors this year, if I had to guess. They drafted Rhett Lauder last year with like 120-ish innings and
they did not throw him. Yeah, I think that's the same for Chase Burns.
Burns has about 100 innings, so I imagine they'll probably do something similar there.
I will tell you, I can't remember if they made the super regional or it was a regional. It was one of the college tournament games they were on against East Carolina, I believe, or Vandy. It was one of them. Anyway, boy, he's really good. I mean,
he's got fun stuff.
His stuff is
100
really
miles
good.
an hour.
Yep.
You can always get local stories right here on YouTube, but go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get notifications to stay in the know.